happens every 7 years. A shift, a change, a nudge. And it has worked like this for me for as long as I can remember. Do you follow the 7-year rule? There aren't really many studies on this, but I do see a pattern and I think it's really good to talk about it. The idea is that every 7 years, people need a life change of some kind to stay happy and motivated. It's psychological, biological, and cultural all at the same time. And if we don't follow through after those 7 years, we start feeling unhappy, a bit restless, and not being in the right place and time. So does it mean that you need to divorce your wife and move to the other side of the globe after the 7 years? Not exactly. Well, maybe, sometimes if you're unhappy, but those decisions don't need to be as drastic. So let me quickly walk you through my path with some examples, and then we'll go through those biological, psychological, and cultural relevances for the 7 years and why it matters. So at around 6, but if you count the pregnancy that it would be 7 years, I moved out of a small apartment and into a house with a big plot of land, a lot of the garden, and the small forest was on that land too. And that was a huge shift for a little kid to start running barefoot through the woods and just enjoying life. Then the next big shift in the cycle actually happened at 17. So it's a much bigger gap, it's more like 10 years. But that's normal. That kind of sometimes happens in early life because early life is kind of predefined by things like school and other factors. So at 17, I was a foreign exchange student in Iowa in the United States, and I graduated high school there. It was a massive shift coming from a post-Soviet Poland into the US, changing my whole mindset and becoming a slightly different person. So I would say the 10-year difference was because it was also kind of calibrating. But then I was already working as a designer when I was 17 before I moved to the US. But then at 24, I decided to ditch it all for a while and just kind of do it as a side gig and went to Northern Ireland to work physical jobs. So I was washing dishes, waiting tables, collecting glasses at a nightclub, and other things like that. And I needed that break because I wasn't fully sure what I was gonna be doing in life. So I needed to have the time to think without being too overwhelmed about job performance, because in these jobs you obviously don't really have to be that great. Then 7 years later at 31, I was back designing, I was growing my company, and I bought my first apartment in Warsaw, Poland. 2 years later I bought another one in Sopot, the one that we're here right now, and that was a big change to also move to a completely different city, a city that I had no connections with except for being a tourist here. And I've been living here for 7, 8 years now. So location-wise, I'm obviously already thinking about the next steps. But some of these cycles overlap one another and some don't. Some start at a different time, and that was exactly the thing with my job. I started working as a designer in '98. After exactly 3 cycles, I started teaching people. That was 2019. And now we are nearing the 4th cycle, and I already know that the 4th cycle is gonna be my last cycle as a designer doing interfaces for the internet, because I just don't feel it anymore. It's been too long. But I'm happy because I'm already switching to other things, and since you're here, then you might be able to see some of them take fruit basically very, very soon. And it's really good to take that switch. But why is it important to do those switches? Why can't you be a designer for 50 years? Some people are and they stay happy and motivated. Well, in my case, it doesn't work like that. So let's talk about why you should try, considering at least, to switch things up a little bit every 7 years. There is a psychological rule called hedonic adaptation, which means that after some times, and usually it's between 5 and 10 years, so 7 sits perfectly in the middle, you get used to a specific state in which you are. So you might be super happy to do something for some initial time, and once that wears off, the happiness goes down back to some baseline. And this is usually when people crave new challenges, new hobbies, new jobs, new friends. It just happens like that. We are in need of different stimuli. And of course, it happens in those typical life stages. So there is the school stage, the building your career stage between 20s and 30s. And in many cases, in 30s, you're exploring what can you do further in life. And then after 40, it's time to evaluate and figure out if maybe that path that you went is exactly the opposite of what you need. But there are also biological factors. We are meat packaged computers on two legs, and that meat and our cells regenerate roughly every 7 to 10 years. Some cells, like the skin, regenerate much faster, but then others regenerate slower. So if you want to be a completely different person, it usually takes between 7 and 10 years, which means that 7 years ago, the person you're looking at right now was a completely different set of cells. And then another factor is neuroplasticity of the brain. And you need your brain sharp and engaged. If it gets too long into a routine, it starts to feel that stagnation deep inside. So trying something new every 7 years is like a workout for your brain. It needs to adapt, it needs to try harder, it needs to get used to a new situation, and that builds those neural connections in the brain, so it basically is stronger, like a muscle. The number 7 in many cultures is also symbolic and tied to transformation. And if you start looking back at your own life, if there were significant changes that happened, they might have actually followed that 7-year pattern. Sometimes it deviates by a year or two in every direction. And those changes don't have to be drastic. Sometimes finding a new hobby or trying to get some new friends instead of the ones that maybe their paths split from yours. I've been through that quite a bit. All those things can contribute, but if you stay at the same baseline constantly for 20, 30, 40 years, then chances are you're not gonna be happy. And happiness is the primary goal of life. So I'm starting new things because it's been 4 cycles of 7 years and they've been slightly different every time, especially the last cycle when I started teaching people. But it's time for something new and it's gonna be super exciting. And I really feel like that 7-year rule has never failed me before because it kind of guides me through life. It tells me that I'm reaching a point after which I won't be as happy doing what I'm doing. So it's time to switch. It's time for a new challenge or a new set of challenges. And if you have this approach to it, it's gonna be exciting rather than terrifying. So do you have a story like that? About the 7-year cycle and the positive change that it brought when you decided to just run with it? Let me know in the comments. And soon, I'm gonna reveal to you what are the next steps in my 7-year cycle. And this video has been me talking for quite a long time, almost like 7 years of listening. So if you've just gotten this far into the video, congrats and thank you. Have a beautiful day and have a really good next 7 years.